up, golf addicts? Welcome to the Tour Junkies show on the Better Sports Network. And as you can tell right off the bat that you just got Pat. I'm your host, Pat Perry. DB is not here. He's out vacationing somewhere. And so, you know what? I'm running the show. I'm running the show this week, and I'm excited to do it. We are coming off a fantastic Open Championship at Royal Liverpool. Yes, Tony, DB loves vacations. He loves vacations. I think he does this. I think he does it on purpose sometimes. He's wanting me to he's wanting me to grow a little bit, grow in my my repertoire on the show here. And so he just says, you know what, Pat, I'm going to go on a vacation and you get to do the show, and you figure it all out. So, I appreciate that. But we're going to have a good show today. We've got Garrett Johnston coming on here in a little bit. He is the host of Beyond the Clubhouse. He's also a writer for Golf Monthly, and he's going to talk about the Open Championship, some takeaways there. We're going to get into a lot of Ryder Cup talk with Garrett, and then we'll close it off probably if we can get some 3M Open picks from him as well. So, and that's another thing. We'll get into a course preview of the 3M Open here in the last segment. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the course, some key stats, weather. We'll talk about some long shot plays for sure, because we've seen some long shots win this golf tournament at the 3M Open. I may have a few first-round leader bets. And of course, we're going to have just the tip. We can't forget that. And so it's going to be a great show. Looking forward to it. But we got to start off talking about Brian Harman at the Open Championship. And you know what? The guy just absolutely dominated. He wins by 6 shots over Sepp Straka, Jason Day, Tom Kim, and John Rahm. All were right behind him at 7. I say right behind him. They were a good bit behind him at 7 under. So it was a good golf tournament, though. I mean, I thought that the course played well. Every time I thought we might see Brian Harman just fall back a little bit to the field, he'd make like a 40-footer for birdie, or he just wasn't making any mistakes. His head was in the game the entire time. Once he had that lead, he just didn't do anything wrong, really. I mean, he's hitting a lot of fairways, hitting a lot of greens. It was really a clinic by Brian Harman. And, we talked about Brian Harman a lot on our show leading up into the week. One of the things we get into, and I know we've talked about this on Just a Tip, is ownership in DFS, those kind of things, trying to find a little bit of leverage. And we thought that Brian Harman would be a little bit chalky, as we say. And so I kind of got off of him a little bit, but I feel like I should have had him on the betting card. He really has just played Open Championship golf very well for a long time. He's played well in the Scottish Open leading up to the Open Championship the last couple of years. So it's exciting stuff to see Brian Harman win. And now he gets to, I think he said he wants to go on his tractor. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to go ride a tractor and just shut out for the day or whatever. And so, if you win the Open Championship, you got the Claret Jug, and you're the champion golfer of the year, you can go ride a tractor if you want to. All right. A couple other things, though, a few takeaways, just like looking at the leaderboard here. It was interesting to see Jason Day get up there, kind of snuck up there into second place. Jason Day had kind of fallen off a little bit since his win earlier this year, but he played well. Tom Kim apparently was, I didn't even hear this. I don't know if you saw it, Tony, but there was this whole thing with Tom Kim was on crutches. Was that real? I was traveling last week too. I was in Nashville, kind of in and out of watching it, especially Brian Harman was dominating so much. But I heard that he was on crutches or something. Did you hear this?
I saw a couple tweets and a couple of videos of him working on his ankle.
Yeah.
Kind of getting the the Kurt Schilling treatment a little bit with the bloody sock and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I didn't see an official official what happened to him or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it looked like he was battling a little bit out there.
Well, he battled well. You got to give Tom Kim some credit. I mean, the guy is obviously he's a fantastic golfer. He's another one kind of like Jason Day. His game had kind of fallen off a little bit in the middle part of the year, and then it's been coming back the last couple of weeks. He had a good tournament at the Scottish Open, and then he shows up well here hobbling around at Royal Liverpool and finished second. And then you had John Rahm just shoot that great Saturday third round, get himself into the conversation. And Sepp Straka just continues to play well. I think Sepp's trying to get his way onto the Ryder Cup team for the European team, and I think he can do it. I really do. I think Sepp is going to be an addition to that team and would be a good one. And poor Rory, just another top 10. Not another top 10 in a major. I think I saw a stat over the last, like, I can't remember what it was, 30 rounds in a major or something like that. He's at like 40 something under, and the next closest one is Scotty Scheffler, which makes sense, but there's not many people even close to him other than Scotty. Yet he has 0 wins in majors over the last few years. And it just continues the heartache at majors. And listen, I'm as big of a Rory fan as there is out there, but I'm starting to doubt it. Starting to doubt whether or not we're going to see him win another major. And you know what? We're going to talk about that in a little bit, because we'll get into some future major odds, specifically at the Masters, where Rory is certainly going to be just a favorite once again. But he comes into these. Maybe they just need to not make him a favorite, put him in like 50-1 odds. I would love that, and then maybe he'll win. But I don't think that's going to happen. You got a lot of coverage complaining again. And I don't, Tony, I don't know what you think about the coverage complaining, but I get a little tired of it. And now I do agree there was some bad coverage, but it gets a little tiresome to have to see this week in and week out when it comes to majors. I guess we just need to accept that it is what it is, right? I mean, do you get tired of it?
It's one of the things that bothers me the most on, Twitter's not a real place. I think, sometimes people forget that, and they'll see a couple tweets and think like the whole world is burning down or whatever. But exactly, week in, week out, I'm not going to throw any names out, but I'm sure the accounts, the same accounts that pop up. It's just constant. And yes, the golf coverage sometimes is not great. But I don't know what they're expecting. I don't know if they're expecting just a broadcast to show no commercials at all, if they want dedicated feeds to every single shot of every single player to be squeezed into 3 hours of coverage. I don't know. I'm at the point now where it's bypassed. The annoyance has bypassed my own griefs and gripes with the coverage. And now I'm just annoyed at the people who are complaining about the coverage. So yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I don't understand why it's just week in, week out. It's the same thing, just complaining over and over and over again.
Yeah, I agree. You know what? Here's what needs to happen is somebody needs to come along, one of the networks, and do a behind the scenes of coverage of a golf tournament, and make it a major or something that most people are watching, and give them a behind the scenes of what it takes to cover a golf tournament, why they're doing it a certain way. Of course, I'm a big golf fan, so I'd be interested in seeing that. But then maybe it would actually quiet down a few people, because they'll see like, oh, well, I didn't know this was how they had to do it, or I didn't know that they couldn't show every single golfer on the golf course at one time, or they only had cameras on certain holes and that was it. I mean, I think there's a lot that goes into coverage that we just don't know. And so then we just complain, right?
Yeah. So to peel back the curtain a little bit too, I used to work at SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio, and I did some of their live coverage. We did actual coverage of the majors, all of that kind of stuff. And our program director, Jeremy Davis, he put it the best way. You've got 18 little mini games inside a whole round.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you have, X number, 20 players, depending on I guess 18 at a time, groups teeing off at the same time at different parts of the hole, different parts of the course, all at the same time. So I don't know. Yeah. Putting some of that stuff into perspective of maybe just, if they're expecting to see every shot, it's just not physically possible.
Yeah.
But again, it's week in, week out, and it's annoying now.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Now, if DB were on with me, he'd probably have some counterpoints, because he loves to complain about it on Twitter. But I will admit, I complained about it on one thing on Twitter, and it was that Azinger felt the need to keep defending Harmon's waggle and his waggling. I didn't understand why, but that wasn't really that much of a complaint of Azinger. I just didn't understand why I kept wanting to, it's like it was almost like he was anticipating the complaining about Harmon.
Yeah.
And he wanted to like get it out of the way, but I don't really think that many people were that worried about all the waggling.
Yeah.
It is what it is. So,
NBC added the waggle counter,
waggle
and
counter.
it didn't work one time, and that's
Yeah. That was interesting that they threw the waggle counter up there, but overall though, it did look like it was a good. I think most players liked the course, and they felt like it was it was a fair test. I did hear some about 17, the par 3. That was one that they might want to blow up, but I don't know. I thought it was an interesting hole. So it was a good major. That's about it really for when you're talking about the Open Championship, because again, Brian Harman just stole the show and won it by 6 shots. Now, you look at Jon Rahm. I mentioned him earlier. He had a great major season for the most part. He had a win at the Masters, a T2 at the Open Championship last week, a top 10 at the U.S. Open, and then that T50 at the PGA Championship. So kind of a little bit of a lull there at the PGA Championship, but for the most part, Jon Rahm had just an amazing season when it comes to majors, and we'll certainly see him on the Ryder Cup team and probably dominating there. And going back to Rory, hasn't won now in 10 years, so no majors in 10 years. I did like the there. I think, I don't know if it was a tweet or maybe it was just on the coverage, but right at the end when he was done, you just had Rory just staring, just blank face at the crowd or whatever, and rain's pouring behind him. And I thought of that cartoon where you just have the cloud over your head, and everywhere you go, it's just raining on you. I think Roy has a pretty good life. I don't think he has a rain cloud over him, but he certainly has a rain cloud over him in the major championships.
What do you think about Brando's comments that it's going to be harder for him to win a major, that it's like he's going for his first major all over again, and it's going to be even harder because he's past his prime now? Is that what do you think about that?
There's 2 parts to that, because I think past his prime is one part, and then it being so hard to win another one, and it's like his first. I do agree with that statement. I think that it's so in Rory's head now that, especially at the Masters, but and I think that the Masters is such a problem because there's such a buildup between the end, meaning the Open Championship, all the way till we get back around to April to the Masters. It just builds up in his head. He puts a lot of pressure on himself. But then you kind, and so we saw him play very disappointing in the Masters this year, but then pick it up for the rest of the majors. I don't know how he changes that. I feel like he's done a lot of different things. He's tried to, put less pressure on himself, mentally and that kind of thing. But I think it is hard for him because, again, he's coming into these majors as one of the favorites almost every single week. And that's, that is or every single major. And that's a tough thing. So he's just going to have to somehow get over that. He's going to need some breaks. I think he's got plenty of time though. So that goes back to the second part of being past your prime. I don't think a guy like Rory, I know he's getting older, but he's in great shape. He's, he still seems to love the game. He's gonna get a course, whether it's Augusta National or somewhere along the line. He's got plenty of majors left to play in. That's going to be ideal for him. Even though I guess you could probably say that a lot of courses are ideal for Rory McIlroy, but I think that there's going to be some breaks that fall his way, and I feel like he's going to get another one. I truly believe that. But we'll have to see. But it's just a lot of pressure. I don't believe though in the past his prime. I don't think that. I think the golfers these days age. They really, I mean, we even saw Phil Mickelson win a major at however old he was, 50. I don't know. But so I feel like he's got a long way to go, but we'll see. Looking at, I think one thing that I'd love to look at is the odds here for the next major, which is at Augusta National at the Masters. And you really see the 3 guys, Scotty Scheffler, Jon Rahm, Rory McIlroy, they're all the favorites right around 10-1. And that's not surprising. I don't think you'll see a lot of change in that really between now. And I know we've got a lot of golf to be played between now and April. I don't see a lot of change there. I just don't. I think those 3 guys will be up there as a favorite. There'll be a few adjustments here and there. But unless there's an injury, I don't think you'll see those not being the 3 favorites. I think Jordan Spieth is going to be very interesting to look at over the next year, really, and really going into, I think Jordan, I've seen him around 20-1, 18-1. If he even gets a little bit longer than that, that's one I'm probably going to be looking to fire in on early for the Masters. I think Jordan, his game is sort of halfway there. It's not, he's had some good moments. He was looking fairly decent at the Open Championship last week, and then he, of course, had a few Jordan Spieth type holes, missed some short putts. But I think if you can get a good value number on Jordan Spieth, somewhere around 20-1, if it gets even longer, I think that's one that you're going to want to fire in on. Another one is a guy that I think is coming around again after a great major season last year, and that's Cameron Young. I've seen him as high as around 32, 33-1. I think Cam Young is another one that I'm going to be looking at to fire in on and probably get some good value. But, you got your guys like Victor Hovland, just looking at the odds right now at 28-1. Colin Morikawa is at 22-1. Justin Thomas is still way too short for me at 22-1. But there are some good numbers that you can look at right now that I think if we just wanted to kind of start to look at firing in early for the Masters. And that's what you got to do. One of the things you need to do in the fall, I can tell you, DB hit Danny Willett, and I believe it was at 150-1 because he started looking at him in the fall, and he went ahead and fired it in for the next year's Masters, and Danny Willett won and hit that. So, it can happen. That's the time to start to look at these majors if you're seeing those odds come out. All right. That's it for this segment. We'll be back. We're going to come back and talk to Garrett Johnston, the host of Beyond the Clubhouse. And then after that, we'll get into some 3M Open Championship talk. We'll talk about the course, the weather, my picks, maybe some first-round leaders, just the tip. All right. We'll be right back.
George here, live at the Scott Fish Bowl 13 New York City Draft at Tito Murphy's. The first round of the Shake Shack division is underway. If you could believe it, team number one, you're going to love this, Mike Lipchenko selects Tua Tagovailoa, quarterback, Miami Dolphins in the 101. An unbelievable, surprising pick here in the 4th spot. From the game day, Scott the King Engel. How does he start his draft? Not with a Seattle Seahawk, but the Buffalo Bills quarterback Josh Allen will lead Scott Engel's team. He's right here. King, what do you think about Josh Allen to start your team?
I didn't think he was actually going to fall to me. The Tua Tagovailoa pick was off the board. Mike said he was going to pivot, so it was just a matter of who's going to fall to me. I just always think about, okay, who's the top guy on my board, who's going to fall to me. But having Josh Allen at 4 proves that every draft has a different flow and you never know what's going to happen.
Bobby Cable's here. Tell us about the Scott Fish Bowl charity personally touched your family.
So basically, when I joined the military, when you get called up, you don't necessarily get money right away. It takes 30 days for any money to hit your account. And what I'm telling you is that if it wasn't for people like Scott Fish Bowl and Toys for Tots, my family wouldn't have had a Christmas. So stuff like this, I'll Hulk smash somebody for, because without it, my family would legitly not have a Christmas because of it.
Scott Fish Bowl and fancycares.org, of course, break the hole. Amazing job for everybody to come out here. And look what we've given ourselves here. A whole Saturday at a New York City bar to ourselves. No family, no job. Some of us working. But really, fantasy football party here with the best people in New York City together. So congratulations to everybody.
Making you money in daily fantasy sports and golf betting. Tour Junkies on Better Sports Network.
All right, well, welcome back to the Tour Junkies show on Better Sports Network. That was some good discussion there about the Open Championship. And you know what? We're going to talk more Open Championship. We've got a guest coming on. We've got Garrett Johnston. He is the host of Beyond the Clubhouse. He's also a writer for Golf Monthly. Garrett, we appreciate you coming on. And, we got to talk the Open Championship right off the bat here, okay? So, now look, most might say that it wasn't that exciting, with the way Brian Harmon won. But I think there are plenty of storylines. I, of course, am in Savannah, Georgia right now, which is where Brian Harmon is from, born and raised. But just kind of what are some of your initial thoughts on the Open Championship, Brian Harmon's win, and what that could mean, and then just overall thoughts on last week.
Yeah, I think him winning and the way he won, obviously 6 shots for a first time major winner, says a lot about what he's capable of, basically. But then also just that exchange with Zach Johnston, captain of the U.S. Ryder Cup team, right as he finished, 72nd hole, and he's like, "Hey, what was the word?" He said something like, "Hey, how's that? How are we looking right now?"
Yeah.
And Zach's like, "Oh, just keep doing your thing, right?" Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, so I think I said a lot about his confidence level, right? So he's like, "Hey, I'm ready. I know that there's a long way to go. There's, I think, 5 tournaments left for the U.S. team before, you know, standings are top 6 are picked. Basically, top 6 are settled.
Yeah.
But I think it's just so much confidence and so much moxie. They're good friends, so that does a lot too, as Zach has mentioned in the past. But yeah, it's a big deal for Harmon. I've always found him an interesting interview. I actually interviewed him for the Savannah Morning News for a few years. Kind of my whole thing is grow with the rookies and write for the hometown papers where you can. And he was always very good about keeping things close to his chest. That makes sense. So like,
Yeah.
I would after the interview, we'd have a good exchange at the top of the interview, and then once we start the interview, he kind of hides below that cap. It's like, man, it's really hard to peel that onion sometimes and get to know him. And I think he's done that with some people, but he's very protective. He was really protective about what he's working on with his putting, as we saw on that Saturday night when Kara Banks from the Golf Channel asked him what's happening with your putting, and he kind of just had a non-answer. He didn't want to divulge. So I think it shows a lot for Brian Harmon going ahead here for the Ryder Cup team. I think you want to have, for a team that's supposed to be the favorites, right? U.S. Ryder Cup team, you want to have some underdogs on that team. And that's what I think makes this particular U.S. Ryder Cup possibility, this team, so dangerous, because you have those individual underdogs like a Harmon. You have Keegan Bradley, who we saw how much it meant to him to play in the Ryder Cup. It's been almost 10 years since he's been on a Ryder Cup. Think about that underdog attitude that he can channel, right? And so I think that's going to help collectively the U.S. team get ready to break that curse since 1993 when they've gone overseas and not been able to win overseas. So I think that's a big deal takeaway there. Then, as you said, Sunday at the Open, I think it was great to see the weather come in, see some rain, and see it feel like a real Open. I texted Dwayne Bach, who is, caddies for Sepp Straka. I said, "What was your takeaway from the final day?" He said, "Dude, in my however many years of caddying, 15 plus years, I have never held the umbrella the entire time." That's what it was. With his guy Sepp, and he was really happy with how Sepp played. He said he's very calm. He liked his kind of measured demeanor, and he had never been there, as you had talked about on previous shows here recently. Sepp had never been in that position, but he looked like, in a weird way, he kind of looked like Wyndham Clark. He looked like it was just supposed to happen. He was supposed to be up there, and I know he didn't win, but he won in another way, and I think mentally that's going to be a big deal going forward, a big takeaway, having Sepp play well.
Yeah, 100%. I agree about Sepp. I've been on Sepp all year. I had him at the John Deere Classic on my betting card. I just have felt really good about his game. He kind of, DB sort of, we were talking about this on the phone. He kind of disagreed with me a little bit, but I get sort of an Ernie Els vibe with Sepp. He's got a really smooth, just quiet swing. There's not a whole lot to it. He just has that kind of demeanor about him. Looks like he could probably get after it. Maybe put a few back and party a little bit, like we've heard the stories of Ernie Els. But I think Sepp is really coming along with his game. And that would kind of point me into the Ryder Cup more into that discussion, because I feel like Sepp could easily be on this European Ryder Cup team. I think he is probably getting consideration, and just the way he's played recently, it looks like that could potentially happen.
And I like where you go with that, because this Ryder Cup team, this European Ryder Cup team, it's going to be a tougher course, right? This year in Marco Simone in Rome, a lot of elevation changes, especially towards the end, a lot of disparity, a lot of things could happen. And what I love about what he's done this year, Sepp, T16 in a tough course like Memorial. It was playing like a beast when Hovland won, your boy Hovland, just a couple months ago. So he played well there. And then a T7 at the PGA, the Oak Hill was playing like a beast as well. So he really has a good track record, I think, in tougher courses. That's going to go well towards going towards Rome, that he has that kind of track record. And also his iron play is so good. 14 shots gained approach, 22nd greens in regulation on the PGA Tour. Like this guy's got a lot in the tank, and I know it's if you look at driving, 18th total driving, his accuracy is at 20th. So I think he really brings a lot for Captain Luke Donald to choose from, because there's just so many strengths. He played well in the last major of the year, right? That was big to get in that top 2, and I think that's going to be something that gets the attention of Luke Donald. Donald has played in those kinds of conditions before, like we saw on Sunday at the Open, right? He knows how hard that is. He knows how hard, even though Straka didn't win, he knows how difficult it is to post that kind of score in an Open like that. So I think that's a big deal. I think Steph is going to be in a good position for the European Ryder Cup team.
Yeah, and he's aggressive too. I mean, that's what he did at the John Deere Classic. A lot of people have said, and I said too, I mean, he's really good on hard courses, obviously like the Honda Classic, but he can score. And he did that in the John Deere. He led the field in birdies, really should have won that by more, if it wasn't for what he did on the 72nd hole. But then also last week, I think he was one of the leaders in the fields when it came to birdies too. So he's a real aggressive player. And I think that's going to be a good thing for them. Going back to the U.S. team, my feelings really are that it's kind of set when you look at the top 12 right now. Now, I know that there's the biggest controversy is certainly Justin Thomas sitting outside at 14 right now. So he's not in that top 12. Now, we know that the top 6, and we've got 4 more events to go. So the top 6, once those 4 events are over, they're locked in. And then the other 6 are going to be captain's picks. I feel like Justin Thomas is really going to have to do a lot here in the next couple of weeks. And we saw that he just committed, I believe, to the Wyndham Championship. So that's a tournament he never really plays. So he's obviously wanting to show something. But right now, I just don't like when you go down the list of the point totals and the standings, I'm not sure I put JT over anybody in the top 12 right now.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, that he's not. I mean, look at who's number 12, Ricky Fowler. And what did you and your cohort say about Fowler right now going into the last major? He's never going to be playing this good going into a major. He's never going to be playing this good going into a Ryder Cup. You know what I mean? Like he's on a heater, and if he's number 12, it's like, whoa, who is JT going to topple? The flip side to that, when you look at JT, what's the bigger narrative, right? The bigger narrative is we haven't won since 93. The U.S. team has not won since 93 overseas. Tom Watson was captain. Well, the first Ryder Cup, and JT had to wait. He was picked over in 2016. He had a really good second year on tour. Was overlooked, and I think he still holds a little grudge on that in 2016. So 2018 was his first one. That was overseas in Paris. As a rookie, he was 4-1. Was the best player on the U.S. team by a mile. And that says a lot about what he can bring to the table. That's the last time we were overseas in a Ryder Cup, right?
Yeah.
And that's a huge factor for JT. I know Zach Johnson is looking at that as something to decide on because of what this Ryder Cup means, because you want to get that first one overseas. And then also, you mentioned adding Wyndham. He hasn't played since his second full year on tour, 2016.
Yeah.
That was the last time he played that event. So it is showing a little bit of trying to get the attention, almost desperation, right? He really does need to get in that mix again. He needs to get back in the conversation. But there's good vibes at Wyndham for Justin Thomas. He, at the age of 16, that was his first ever PGA Tour event, right? He played that as a 16-year-old. He shot 65 hello world moments in 2009. So if there's a place to get the good vibes going again and to really get back in the conversation, I think he found the right place with Wyndham. And his overall game looks so good. His irons are still ranked decently. I think he's in the top 20 iron play around the green, around the green, as I adjust my camera, is still in the top 20. It's just his putter he really needs to figure out. That's what it's going to come down to. I think JT's putting, that's the priority at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you look at his stats, he's definitely going to, check a lot of boxes when it comes to the ball striking still. So that's there. And we were just seeing kind of these blow up rounds, and he really needs to avoid those high numbers. But I think you can still see a good stretch out of him. And again, and I think you're right. You bring up a good point, and it's really about putting the right team together. And it's not always just, and that's why I feel like it's a good thing that they have the top 6, and then the captain can pick another 6. David and I were over in Paris for the Ryder Cup. So we were there on that golf course at Le Golf National, and you could tell right off the bat when you walked out there and you saw how narrow those fairways were and how they had those cut, we were like, oh, there's going to be some trouble for some of our guys. Like we're friends with Kiz. We wanted Kiz on that team, but he probably should have been on that team if you wanted to win. That's another reason, like a guy like JT played so well. Webb Simpson played really well over there. But other than that, you had your, the guys, the Bombers, they had some trouble. And that's exactly what the European squad is going to do. I mean, they're going to tighten those fairways at Marco Simone. They're going to make it as, and they should. You got to tailor it to the way your team plays. And so I agree. You got to make sure this is the team fits together, right?
Yeah, you do. And I think that, wow, there's just so many players that could make that team fit well. I mean, I remember what Tiger Woods said when he picked Ricky Fowler for the President's Cup team in 2019. He said he's just such a good team room guy. You need to have those team room guys, and Fowler's up there. Talking about built-in pairings for the U.S. team, Xander and Cantley. That's been the case for it seems like the last couple of years, right? In both competitions, and so they're such good putters too. I look at Cantley; he's a top 3 in shots gained putting on the PGA Tour this year. So you think about how do you win Ryder Cups, and a lot of it's with the short stick. So those two guys, as they kind of are to the middle of the rankings, there's a lot of competition left, so we could see that fluctuate. But you do have to think about them being a built-in pair. Another guy, speaking of putting, Danny McCarthy, 15th right now in the rankings. I know we got a little ways to go, but he's he's second PGA Tour this year in shots gained putting. I mean, like, this guy historically, since the word go, since he's been out there the last 6 years, this guy's been somebody who is so good with the flat stick. And if Zach Johnson wants to break that curse of the European Ryder Cup players winning in Europe, you're going to need solid putters. I think that's a consideration, part of the conversation for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And that will bring me to my next question I have, because speaking of solid putters or not solid putters, Cam Young is on this team for the most part. I think we could agree that we're going to see Cam Young over in Rome, right? Now, I know you talked
too
with
much firepower.
Yeah, too much firepower. I know you've talked with him recently, or talked with Paul Tesori some. Putting was a big issue. I mean, I felt like watching the Open Championship last week that he just was not ever going to make a putt. I think he finally did on the 72nd hole, maybe. But so talk about Cam Young a little bit, because I think he's an interesting piece to this team. I mean, he's very intimidating with the way he hits the ball, with his ball striking off the tee. Putting has certainly been a struggle, but talk a little bit about what you've talked with Paul Tesori about, and then about Cam Young's game.
Yeah, and I've pardon the noise behind me here on Capitol Hill, so there's all kinds of cars driving around. Apologies, but yeah, I think his game, as we saw at the Open Championship, he's such a good player that can adapt. Right, we saw that slow motion shot of him hitting that low burning iron shot, right? I mean, he's so good at being able to adapt to links golf and being able to adapt to different types of golf. But obviously, driving is the 1-2 punch for him. That's his biggest strength. And I think, having talked to Paul Tesori, I said, like, what's your guys? How's he feeling right now? How's his attitude this week of the Open? This was on Friday night, and he said, you know what? It's a mentality change. The John Deere Classic, you remember, you get a 36-hole lead there in that tournament 2 weeks back. During the John Deere, he committed to a different inner dialogue with himself, saying, okay, if I'm hitting good iron shots, but I'm missing short birdie putts, well, the takeaway off of that missed putt is, you know what? I've been striping it all day. That I'm feeling great about my game. My irons are dialed in. That's the takeaway. It's as opposed to, I can't make a short putt all day. What's my problem? You know what I mean? So he missed a lot of short ones at the Open. We do know that, and it was frustrating a lot of us who had action on him, major action, right? But knowing that his inner dialogue, that he's working on that, and Tesori said there's a lot of anger and just kind of pent up frustration that his guy is feeling, knowing that he's working on that and trying to address how he kind of speaks to himself and how he deals with takeaways there. I think that's a big part about moving forward for a guy like Cam Young. At least he's addressing it, right? He knows that that's a weakness right now with his putting, and he's got to get that dialed in. So he's got a pretty level-headed guy in his bag with Tesori. I think all that, having gone through a tough U.S. Open win in 2012, the Olympic Club, I mean, you've got a guy that's been through a lot of Ryder Cups. He knows a lot of Ryder Cup teams, atmosphere, a guy that's going to be able to keep him calm. I think that's huge, having Tesori on the bag. So Cam Young, man, he's been knocking on the door. Has he done anything else? Is there anything else he can do but win at this point?
I know, it's crazy. It's
You know?
nuts. I mean, I cannot believe he doesn't have a win. And you're right. I mean, we've known Paul Tesori quite a long time, and he really is he's a great guy. He's a great guy to have on the bag. I agree. It kind of levels out Cam Young a little bit. Paul can certainly talk, which is a good thing, probably kind of keeps his mind off of some of that anger or whatever it might be. But I've been kind of, I got off of Cam Young a little bit earlier, like kind of around the Masters, but now I feel like he's back. I feel like his game is certainly back. We've seen it the last couple of golf tournaments. And so now we move to the 3M Open, and he's playing. He's the highest priced, actually, DraftKings golfer, and one of the favorites in the field. I like him at 16-1. So I do think that Cam Young is going to be somebody that I'm certainly betting on this week. But as we're getting into the 3M Open this week, in a pretty good field, I think, a lot of guys that I was a little bit surprised came over directly from the Open. Sepp's playing in this golf tournament. Cam, who I've mentioned,
Yeah.
Tony Finau is obviously one of the favorites. So as you're looking at it this week, talk about maybe a few guys that you like, maybe at sort of the top range or maybe middle odds a little bit. So, and if you don't have the odds in front of you, it's fine. I got them right in front of me, so I can even tell you what they are. So,
No, I appreciate that. I think for me, when it comes to betting and fantasy golf, I have a video on YouTube, Garrett Johnston on fantasy golf. That's what I do throughout the year. But the focus for me is, what have you been in a final group lately? Or have you, what is knocking on the door, right? What is good recent play? Even just being in the second to last group, kind of feeling that energy on a Sunday, whether it's a major or not. But I think that kind of stuff served Victor Hovland really well at Memorial. Remember when he came back from 3 back going into the back 9 on Denny McCarthy? McCarthy had never won and still hasn't won on tour. And Hovland had been knocking on the door in majors especially. So when we talk about Cameron Young, it has to start with him playing in the final group of a Open Championship. I don't care if you won it or not. You played in shit conditions.
Yeah.
And you went through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that is irreplaceable experience. Especially somebody like Young, you need that kind of experience. So I look at Cam Young kind of off the top. He's been knocking on the door. There's nothing else he can do. He has the right people around him. It's just a matter of a few putts dropping, I think, this week. Sepp Straka at 9,500 on DFS. I love that his caddy, Dwayne Bach, having spoken to him recently, said that he's so calm. Like, he just feels like he's very measured under pressure when it matters, right? As you make the back 9 going into the final 9 on Sunday, he just has that right attitude. And them as a duo, they've got a win at John Deere and a T2. I mean, can you get better than that? Is there a hotter start in pro golf with a caddy and a player? Obviously, Bach is full time with Kisner, and Kisner's on the bench right now, so that's why it's working. But I love what Sepp Straka brings to the table. There's a lot of great stats on Straka. Great iron player. He is 57th in shots gained putting. I know that's one that kind of steps out. It's like, well, maybe it's not a top number for a tour player, but it's still better 50% at 57. And then beyond that, Lucas Glover, you mentioned him in your podcast recently, and I apologize for the background noise there. But Lucas Glover, 8,200. What I like about him is he's been knocking on the door 3 straight top 6s on the PGA Tour. Barbasol, what I liked about that, he was in the second to last group, and he was feeling the pressure. He was able to answer what Norman was doing in front of him. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't like he was backdooring a top 6. This was a guy that was truly in the hunt, feeling the pressure, trying to get that win again. And that, having gone through that the last 3 starts, that's irreplaceable. And I think at 8,200, there's so much value for Lucas Glover. Beyond that, another guy knocking on the door, Taylor Pendrith, 7,900 on DFS. I love what he brings because he was 6th at Barbasol, just kind of knocking on the door there. But even before that, he had a T14 when he played with Ricky Fowler and Adam Hadwin there in that final grouping when Ricky won. And I don't care that Ricky won that. I know that, obviously, for Ricky's career, that was huge. But for Taylor Pendrith, who's always been a great driver of the ball, distance has always been a big strength of his, which you need on the PGA Tour. The fact he was in that final group, he was able to knock on the door and feel what that atmosphere was like, that's huge for him. And I think at 7,800, that's good value. He's 27th in greens regulation this year on the PGA Tour. He's 27th in distance. So there's a lot of factors that combine to make him a good pick for this week, I think, at 3M.
Yeah, I love the Pendrith pick. I have been on Pendrith. Really at the beginning of the year, kind of got off of him a little bit, but this week I feel really good about him. If you look at the odds on those guys, Sepp is at 22-1. Obviously, we mentioned Cam Young's at 16-1, and then you got Lucas Glover is right around 50-1. And I would say Lucas Glover, if I'm looking at the odds from versus where I was seeing him yesterday versus today, he's probably made one of the biggest moves. He was really up around like 60 to 65-1, and now he's 50-1. So you've obviously seen some money come in on Lucas Glover. And then Taylor Pendrith is at 65-1. So I think all really good plays this week. I like it a lot. I mean, it's I think this is going to be an interesting week. We've seen guys like a Cam Champ win, a bomber out here, but then you got a Michael Thompson that's won, and he's a pure ball striker, so. And where's he also won Honda Classic? Who's also won the Honda Classic? Yep. Sepp Straka, right? So it's a lot of different players that I think we could see win here at the 3M. So it's going to be a good week, and excited to see what we get. All right, Garrett. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I won't take any more of your time. Hopefully the sirens weren't coming to get you. But and they're not just standing there waiting on you. But no, we really appreciate it. Tell us where we can find you. I know I mentioned the host of the Beyond the Clubhouse podcast, but where else can we get you on Twitter or anything social media, or what else can we plug for you?
Yeah, on Twitter at Johnston Garrett, and then YouTube channel is Garrett Johnston on Fantasy Golf. So usually plug away on that. I love what you guys are doing. I do it similar too. It's just talk to the caddies and get a sense of what they're up to and what they think of the courses as well. You had a good interview with Tesla Terrain there last week. So, that would be the main thing, Twitter and then also on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it, Garrett. Thank you for the insight, and hope you have a great day and a great week. All right, we'll be back on the Tour Junkies show on Better Sports Network. We'll be right back.
What can we expect from you out there on the track tonight?
Listen, I have a wife, 2 kids. I have, full-time jobs. I'm never nervous. I don't even know what that word means. Can you explain what nervous means? No. I'm ready to have fun. I've never done anything like this before. I got asked to be a part of this. This is fascinating. Like, it's so cool to just look around and see what goes on here. So I'm just excited to get out on the horse. And you want trash talk? Is that what you're asking me for? No trash talk. I hope everyone does well.
All right. Everyone's going to do well, but it has to be a winner. So give me your trifecta. Who's going to come in first, second, and third? Your heat.
I will go Maria 1, me 2, Willie 3, Moose goes 4th.
Well, it's very simple. I won this event last year. I won my heat, and so the defending champ has to be the favorite. Now, that makes me a little nervous just because I feel like it's hard to repeat. There's a little pressure when you're the favorite. But that being said, I'm still optimistic.
So your heat, it's you,
yes.
Moose and Keith from Better Sports Network, and Willie Colon.
I think Keith might be my stiffest competition. And I asked for this because I actually recruited Keith, if you didn't know. So Keith, if you win, you're welcome.
Malusis is very good. I mean, he knows what he's doing. But I'm going to go with Maria.
Keith is waving to the crowd. He must pay attention because they're off. It's Mark Malusis going for the lead. Maria Marino on the outside, and now Keith Irizarry on the outside with speed, and they're 3 wide into the first turn. Woo! Mark Malusis is locked in for his life. 138 and 2. They're into the stretch. Sportscasters Derby 2. And still in front, Keith Irizarry. And now Mark Malusis is trying to squeeze on through.
Come on! Come on! Let's go! Come on, dig it! Yeah!
Keith Irizarry. Keith, you did it all the way, wire to wire, over Mark Malusis.
Awesome! That was so cool!
The champ is here! Keith, what was it like being out there? Adrenaline rush, you were doing the Instagram Live, so there was no panic. You looked cool, calm, collected the whole time, and you won it.
I felt really comfortable. I did. Like, I know you were joking with me before. Are you nervous? Are you whatever? What are you? David, the driver, was awesome. He's like, we're going to win this. I said, all right, let's win this. And he said, let's go. Yeah, I just felt really comfortable. I did. It was fun. We're in the lead. I got Maria Marino on the right side of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to beat us, right? And then out of nowhere, you see Moose coming up this way, and we feel him breathing down our neck. And I'm like,
Moose
no,
on the loose. Watch out.
Moose was definitely on the loose. And we just got Moose by a neck, a nose, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but again, all of this for a great cause, and it was absolutely awesome to do this. It was cool.
All right, Keith, congratulations. And no matter what, you could always hold this over Moose's head.
Now back to Tour Junkies
Damn it! Hit one good fucking iron shot.
I don't think you like that one.
on Better Sports Network.
Training camps have opened up across the country, and we are getting that much close to real live football. Get all the coverage you need for your drafts with the Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Draft Guide. Their teams of experts are updating it throughout the season, so it's truly a living guide to help you win your league. It's digital, constantly updates with new information. You can purchase that new draft guide for $26.99 or get it for free with a monthly or annual subscription to Fantasy Alarm. Start your free 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm All Pro and get immediate free access to the draft guide. Go to fantasyalarm.com. All right, Fantasy Alarm, they do great stuff over there. Welcome back to the Tour Junkies show on Better Sports Network. And now it is time to talk about the 3M Open Championship. That is where they are on tour this week. They are at the TPC Twin Cities Golf Course in Blaine, Minnesota, which is just outside of Minneapolis. It's a fantastic area. The course was designed by Arnold Palmer back in 2000. You had Tim Herron and Tom Lehman actually give it a little update and redesign in 2018. Tim Herron, how about that one? Lumpy. So great course, though. It's a par 71, playing just over 7,400 yards. Here's the deal, folks. There's a lot of water on this golf course, all right? Water is in play on about 15 holes, okay? So that's something you're going to want to look at. You want some guys that don't hit it in the water a lot. You got bent grass fairways that are pretty, average as far as how wide they are. Rough is Kentucky bluegrass with a mix of fescue. They can get it pretty thick. They can usually get it around like 3 inches or so. And it was thicker last year. So we'll see how that looks as the week goes on. These greens are bent grass greens, and they run super true at about 12 on the stent meter. The course, though, I think it's one that's like, it's nothing special. There's a lot of different types that can win here. We've seen like a guy like Tony Finau win last year. We've seen Cameron Champ win here. We've seen Matthew Wolff get his first victory on tour here. And right behind him in second that year was Colin Morikawa and also Bryson DeChambeau. And then you look at guys like Michael Thompson has won here. Michael Thompson is sort of known just to be a great ball striker. So we see a lot of different types of players that can win on this golf course. And so that's really what I'm going to be looking at this week. I'm definitely going to have ball striking in my model. I'm going to have birdie or better percentage. I want some of the guys that can score. I'm going to look at the putters, though. And from a putting standpoint, I'm not necessarily just going to look at strokes gained putting on bent grass greens. I'm going to look at more recent, like last 50 rounds, strokes gained putting just overall. That's what I want to see, because it can become a little bit of a putting contest. The greens aren't like that tricky. They just aren't. There's not a whole lot to them. So you're going to see a lot of birdies drop unless there's some bad weather. And I don't think we're going to see bad weather at all. All I'm really seeing right now is it's going to be very hot, very hot. But other than that, not much wind, not much rain at all. And I don't think they make a stat for like guys that play good in the heat. I've been looking for it. I don't see it. So if somebody has that stat, then you can look at that one. That's who you can look at as far as who'd be a good winner. But we don't have it. So, when you look at this course, I think, again, there's a lot of different players that we can see that can win here. When you look at the top of the board, you've got guys like, Cam Young is up here. He is at 16-1, and Tony Finau. They're both at 16-1. Hideki is also around 16 to 18-1. I'm kind of favoring Cam Young up top. I like him this week. I like what I've seen out of him. We talked about it with Garrett Johnston. He's getting his head straight, it feels like. So 16-1 for Cam Young, I think, is one of my favorites. A couple other guys that I've looked at this week. I love Cam Davis. I think Cam Davis is just coming into form at the right time. This feels like a good course fit for him. He is right around 33-1. So Cam Davis kind of in that mid-range is one that I'm looking at. You got guys like Lucas Glover. We talked about earlier. He's at 45-1. Some sites have him at 50-1. Lucas Glover figured out how to putt. We've waited for years, and all of a sudden, Lucas Glover has figured out how to putt. As a matter of fact, he gained strokes in his last 2 tournaments putting. We haven't seen that. I think the last time he did that, he won the John Deere Classic a couple of years ago. So that's a very good sign for a guy like Lucas Glover. You could even, like, if you wanted to just look at a top 5 at 10-1 or a top 10 at plus 450 for Lucas Glover. If I'm looking down the board a little bit more, there's a few others that I'm kind of a fan of out here. Nikolai Højgaard, we've seen him play great recently. He's at 55-1. Garrett mentioned Taylor Pendrith, another one, 65-1. I think that's a good number for him. Certainly some long shots, though, in this golf tournament. We could see a guy like Sam Bennett, win his first golf tournament, 130-1. Kind of similar to Matthew Wolff, could come in here and, his whatever, 3rd or 4th pro start and get you a win right there at 130-1. I think he could be interesting as well. So we'll see. Those are kind of my favorites off the top there. I'm going to give you one more bomb here. It's Troy Merritt season, Tony. I don't know if you knew that. Did you know it was Troy Merritt season? But it is. Did you know that?
I didn't. Fill me in.
Well, this is when Troy Merritt, maybe, he is he's a good heat player in the hot. I don't know, but Troy Merritt always seems to come around this time of year. And so he's at 180-1. I'm going to have Troy Merritt on the card. So a lot of people don't know about Troy Merritt season, but this is when it is. So,
That's right. It's kind of like the different seasons. I've got a Kevin Streelman season, which is in early January to maybe early February. You got about a month in there where he gets real hot in some of them tournaments. And yeah, so yeah.
Yeah,
not 4 seasons a year for some of these guys, but it's real quick.
Exactly. So we'll see how Troy Merritt does, but 180-1, that's a long shot for you. All right, it's time for just a tip. Okay, it's time for just a tip, and then I'm going to get into my cash lineup. By the way, and DB and I's cash lineups have been really terrible. So maybe just me doing it will make it better. But here's my just a tip, and you know what? Tony, I'm going to tell you something. This happens a lot on the podcast too. And sometimes, a lot of times, I'll forget that I have to do something. And so DB talks. And while he's talking, I'm figuring out what I'm supposed to do or what I'm supposed to remember or looking at something. For instance, first round leaders. I don't have any written down, so I can't give you any first round leaders. But I will say this, there's no weather wave advantage, so I probably wouldn't be doing it anyway. But here's my just a tip. Narratives. All right. When you listen to folks like us or you're on the Twitter or whatever, you always see a lot of narratives, whether it's, guys like Troy Merritt's season, guys that are playing well at certain times of the year, or you hear the narratives that we hear this week. Okay. Which is going to be, can a guy play well traveling back from Europe? And he's got all these things, all this travel. Can he play well this week at the 3M? I'm not a big fan of that narrative. And so I think you have to kind of sort of work your way through the narratives, and just make sure that you're not always just too married to them. I think like a Cam Young can certainly still play good this week. I don't care that he had to travel over from Europe. I really don't. It doesn't bother me all that much unless the airline lost his bags or something. I just don't see it. But you hear that a lot. I wouldn't let that get into your head too much. So when you're looking at your picks, whether it's in DFS, whether it's in your bets, I just think some narratives we just don't really have to pay attention to all that much. Now, another one is the geographical narrative. DB loves the geographical narrative. Okay. Like, when we're in Sea Island, the Sea Island Mafia, all those boys that play out of Sea Island, that, just because a player lives near a course or in the vicinity, it's like Keegan Bradley when he won a few weeks ago. He lives somewhere in the vicinity at some time, and people brought in that narrative. It's not always going to work that way, though. I've seen plenty of guys from Sea Island just trunk slam on Friday and not make the cut at the golf course that's right near where they live. Or heck, they may even live on the golf course and they're still missing the cut. So I think I guess what I would get across really is that you just sort of have to, you can listen to the narratives, you can pay attention to it, but don't get married to the narratives, because I just don't really think that it really factors in all the time. It's just not a 100% tried and true way to pick your players that week. So there you go. And by the way, I had totally forgotten about the Just a Tip, Tony, and I came up with that. I feel like that was a good one. I just came up with it right then. So, that's part of my growth, Tony, with DB not being here. That's part of the growth. You got to learn to think on the fly, right? I mean, it sounded like I'd thought about that an hour ago, right?
You had that all written down in your journal. And
I mean, you thought this whole thing was all notes on narratives, didn't you?
Good for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm a professional.
That's why DB throws you the keys every once in a while.
Yeah.
He knows.
I know. I am a pro. All right. Well, let's get into the cash lineup, and then we will button this thing up. And we're going to start here. I'm going to start in the 8K range in the cash lineup, and I'm going to go with Lucas Glover. He's at 8,200. Like him a lot this week. We've talked about him just a ton. I'm a big fan of Lucas Glover. Then I'm going to drop down into that 7K range, and I'm going to kind of go down to the bottom here. And where's that? Oh yeah, there he is. Chez Reavie. I like Chez Reavie a lot. He is at 7,300, been playing really well lately. So I'll go with Chez at 7,300. That'll get me back up into the 8K range, but I think I need to get into the 9s here. And I am going to, I'll tell you, it's really hard. I want to take Cam Davis, but I think that's a little bit too risky. So I'm going to jump up to Lucas Hebert. Hebert is just playing well in all his starts. He is a rookie, obviously just coming out of college, but I love how he's playing. It gives me a little more room to drop into the 8K range there. Then I'm going to go with JT Poston. Love him this week. He's also been playing extremely well. He is at 8,400. That keeps me in the 8K range, so I can really stay in here, and I like this range a lot. I'll go down to, let's see. We'll go with Marcus Hubbard, making a ton of cuts, playing extremely well. I'll go with Marcus Hubbard. And then Mark Hubbard. And then I got to go with my boy Nikolai Højgaard. Made 15 of 18 cuts this year. He is at 7,900. That's going to leave a little on the table. That's going to leave 500 on the table. But our cash lineup is going to be Lucas Hebert. We're going to have Lucas Glover. This is a Lucas lineup. We got Nikolai Højgaard, Mark Hubbard, JT Poston, and Chez Reavie. You know what? I don't know how much I like that, but that's probably a good thing because of the way our cash lineups have done. So that'll probably cash easily this week. All right, that's all I got, folks. Thank you for tuning in to the Tour Junkies show on Better Sports Network. We will be back next week. I think David's going to be back, hopefully, as long as he doesn't just move down to wherever his vacation is, or he's not on another vacation. I don't know. But we will be back next week.